I could not get this question out of my head, so I just had to do it. In fact, I looked it up right after I was done with the Krampus project because I just couldn't get it out of my head and I didn't want to randomly forget. ADHD brain. So let's talk about it. Is the Grinch based on Krampus? Now, I wanted to answer this question sooner rather than later, so this is just a little mini dive. In case you haven't looked at the duration of the video, there's absolutely no way I could squeeze art into this one. There's not a lot to talk about, so let's just get started with it. First, let's just briefly mention that, first of all, everyone pronounces Dr. Seuss's name wrong. It's actually Seuss, like voice. He may have, at one point, given up on correcting people on his name, taking solace in that Dr. Seuss rhymes with Mother Goose. But I'm going to use the correct pronunciation for this video. Theodor Seuss Geisel, or Dr. Seuss, was a prolific children's author and political cartoonist. During the 1950s, he wrote over 60 books, and there are even several words in the English language that were invented by Seuss. Words like nerd, oobleck, and Grinch. Now, granted, Seuss had a very creative way of putting words together, but these are all things that we actually have meaning for in English. Nerd is used often disparagingly against intellectual people, usually in a school setting, though recently there's been some attempt to reclaim it, along with dork, goober, and geek. Oobleck refers to a gooey material made by mixing cornstarch and water. This creates a non-Newtonian liquid that firms up solid whenever pressure is applied. Kinda neat. It looks incredible inside a speaker. Then there's the Grinch. The mean one. The one you wouldn't want to touch with a 39.5-foot pole. And for those of you who saw the Krampus video, you'll know I asked the question, is the Grinch based on Krampus? Well, if you didn't though, or don't know what Krampus is, let me clue you in really fast. Krampusnacht is a tradition in Germany and Alpine folklore involving an evil counterpart of Santa or Saint Nick called the Krampus, a goat-like devil with black fur and a long tongue that captures, beats, or eats naughty children during the Christmas season. I'm glad he calmed down and just started dropping off coal instead. Some sources say that Krampus can be green, and Mount Crumpet is supposed to be an allegory for the Swiss Alps where Krampus is said to live. So with him stealing Christmas away from the Who's, I had to wonder... So here's how it goes. The Grinch first appeared in a 33-line illustrated poem by Dr. Seuss called The Hubbub and the Grinch, which was originally published in May of 1955 by Red Book magazine. He began writing how the Grinch stole Christmas a couple years later, around the beginning of 1957. He'd recently completed Cat in the Hat and was trying to found beginner books with Phyllis Bennett Cerf and his wife, Helen Palmer Geisel. Helen acted as an official editor, as she had with previous Dr. Seuss books, had ongoing mental problems, and suffered a small stroke in April of 1957. So between the continued commercialization of Christmas and his wife's health problems, it wasn't Krampus that became the inspiration for the Grinch. Dr. Seuss had this to say, quote, I was brushing my teeth on the morning of December 26th of last December when I noted a very Grinchish countenance in the mirror. It was Seuss, said Geisel back in 1957 interview with Red Book. Something had gone wrong with Christmas, he said. I realized, or more likely with me. So I wrote the story about my sour friend the Grinch to see if I could rediscover something about Christmas that I had obviously lost. And that makes me think of something. Have you guys seen that new Walmart ad? The one that has all the Who's working for Walmart and the Grinch plays a porch pirate? Who authorized this? Obviously some corporate head that has no recollection of what the original intent of the source material was. So maybe Krampus and the Grinch have way less in common than I thought, and the things I thought I knew were all coincidence. But it is still an anti-capitalist story, and Walmart really should be ashamed. Actually though, did you know Seuss wrote How the Grinch Stole Christmas only a matter of a couple of weeks? That's pretty impressive. The only part he struggled with was the conclusion. According to the 1996 biography, Dr. Seuss and Mr. Geisel, Seuss himself said, Quote, I got hung up getting the Grinch out of the mess. I got into a situation where I sounded like a second-rate preacher or some biblical truism. Finally, in desperation, without making any statement whatsoever, I showed the Grinch and Who's together at a table and made a pun of the Grinch carving the roast beast. I had gone through thousands of religious choices, and then, after 3 months, it came out like that. Fascinating. I know that for A.A. Moreland, there have been several surprise conclusions to the stories they've written for Tales of Atonement. I guess that's just how it is with writers sometimes. Well, I hope you appreciate this little mini dive. I'll consider this question answered, and I'll see you again next week. Don't forget that Patreon is the best way to support this channel. Not only are you supporting us, but then we turn around and change that money into great art, music, voiceovers, comics, maybe even merch like shirts, hats, or plushies one day. But you'll get access to the Tales of Atonement coloring pages, the Monomyth comic book, and even the unpublished scripts so that you can read the story way ahead of time. Check out the link if you want to look into that. Some of our great patrons include Shadow Fox, Arya Gamari, Charles Tam, Jace Moreland, and Lundair Lumen.